Happy Friday, Carnies, and welcome back to the Daily Carnage Show. I'm Shannon, I'm a digital marketing strategist at Carney, and I'm your host, and I'm joining you today by voice only. And that's because, as you may know, a heat wave is currently hitting the eastern part of the United States, and our beloved studio is not currently habitable. But I am really excited to be on the mic today because we are talking about research, one of my favorite topics. Specifically, I want to talk to you about two really important pieces of research that do a really good job of illustrating where the marketing industry is at large right now and where we may need to course correct. So grab your coffee and let's get started. It is the end of June and the end of Pride Month. And you may have noticed in what feels like a significant shift from recent years, major brands have really been dialing down their public support for Pride Month this year. There's been a lot less rainbow-themed merchandise and colorful store displays, but I think more concerningly, there's been fewer vocal affirmations of LGBTQ rights, as companies seem to be taking a much quieter, cautious approach. And this is indeed backed by data. According to a Gravity research survey of over 200 corporate executives, 39% of brands have planned to scale back their public pride engagement this year, and that includes things like sponsorships, social media messaging, and themed merchandise. And I wish I could say that's because brands have just reallocated all of that money and energy into supporting causes for the queer community, but that would not be the case. This big retreat is largely just driven by political pressure and fear of backlash. As we know, under the Trump administration's second term, federal agencies have been ramping up scrutiny of corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion, so all our DEI initiatives, and companies are beginning to really fear investigations or regulatory retaliation, especially those with federal ties or public visibility. So everyone's kind of laying low. Companies and brands want to avoid being seen as politically aligned or provocative, and this is especially true after some high-profile controversies, notably Bud Light's 2023 collab with transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney. If you remember, she sparked severe backlash from conservative groups after working with Bud Light, which resulted in all kinds of absurd boycotts and plummeting sales. You know, people changed the beer that they drink, and we all kind of watched and took notice. I think interestingly, it was Bud Light's really lukewarm response that angered both sides of this quote-unquote argument. They simultaneously were able to alienate their LGBTQ audience while also failing to appease their critics. You know, a friend to all is a friend to none. And then similarly, Target faced threats and boycotts over its Pride merchandise. And so of course they pulled some of those items from the shelves and reduced their in-store Pride displays in subsequent years. Target Pride merch kind of became synonymous with rainbow washing. Okay, so for example, I just Googled Target Pride merch, and one of the first cringe examples is Live, Laugh, Lesbian, which is it's just not camp enough to be good, and that's the problem. You know, it's possible that a queer person made this shirt. It certainly feels like that isn't the case. So this year, Target is continuing this toned down approach, and it's offering Pride products only in select stores and primarily online. And a company spokesperson emphasized that Target's ongoing commitment to inclusivity and local sponsorships continues. We're seeing this also with retailers like Kohl's and Macy's, who have skipped public announcements altogether, significantly scaling back their promotional campaigns compared to previous years. And despite this tonal shift, many companies are still working behind the scenes to support LGBTQ plus employees. Only 14% of surveyed companies said they were reducing internal Pride engagement, which is good. So the numbers do suggest that brands may not be altogether abandoning the community, maybe just instead moving their support away from public marketing and reallocating it toward internal culture building, which is great. We'll take that. As of now, it looks like employee resource groups and private events and recruitment strategies that are focused on LGBTQ inclusion are still active in many corporations. But still, this muted response has sparked some concern among advocates. Eric Blome of the Human Rights Campaign Foundation warned that this corporate backtracking under pressure risks long-term credibility and consumer trust. And with nearly 10% of American adults now identifying as LGBTQ+, advocates are arguing that this inclusivity should be seen as a business imperative, not a liability. I think the problem here is that in several years past, when brands were heavily promoting their advocacy and releasing these massive pride lines of merchandise, people in the community sensed that it was disingenuous, that it was a money grab, and that should it ever be inconvenient to hold these corporate views and values, these brands would get real quiet. You can't just be fair weather fans of queer people. It's not a viral trend. It's not a Q2 business objective. And it looks like a lot of that 2021 pride just ended up being 2025 shame. And that brings me to a recent study by Collage Group titled Beyond Pride. And the takeaway here is that LGBTQ plus consumers strongly value brand support during Pride and throughout the year. Actually, 53% of these individuals believe it's more important now than it was 2 years ago for brands to participate in cultural events like Pride. And 45% said that they would actually stop supporting brands that retreat from such engagement. You know, the message here is like, we need you now more than ever. But I think what's most interesting about this research is that it revealed that despite these sort of media narratives about Pride being too risky for corporations, actual public support for Pride remains strong. And these few instances of backlash that have been highlighted are largely driven by a small vocal minority. Survey results showed that only about 10% of the general population consistently opposes brand participation in Pride. And that figure has remained stable over time. And this is hopeful. The culture really hasn't shifted on this issue. It's just that the risks have been exaggerated and overemphasized in the press. And I hate to say it, but low integrity brands have responded. But those brands that held the line through this wave were rewarded. We know the LGBTQ community actively participates in these heritage months and cultural milestones, often more than other groups. There's a real culture of solidarity and an activist mindset that extends to other underrepresented communities. So the action item here is to adopt a genuine year-round strategy. There are gay people all year long. And one note on this, I can really appreciate that a lot of these brand decisions come down from the heavens of senior leadership. And sometimes marketers really have limited input on these things. Sometimes we're the only ones in the room sounding the alarm or trying to throttle the action. I myself have been in those rooms. I think it's safe to say I've done some damage to my relationships with people who could have advanced my career. The truth of it is sometimes your role is to give your best counsel to people with limited visibility and just hope that they listen. You know, on one end of the spectrum, yes, the risk is people might light cases of your beer on fire. But I think the more reasonable risk here is that you're alienating your brand from Gen Z, who are about to have, you know, the most buying power in the world. I don't know. Well, maybe. But seriously, the young people are identifying with diversity, authenticity, fluidity more than any other generation. They expect brands to reflect their values back to them. They respond best to inclusive, human-centered stories. You can't live, laugh, lesbian your way to building loyalty with this group. If you're gonna do a pride campaign, work with people in the community that you're communicating to. That's the only way you're gonna create meaningful work. And you better commit to keeping up that same energy in July and November, no matter what is going on in the courts. It's really validating to find this research that supports what I think many of us were sensing, which is that there's been an industry-wide overcorrection and overreaction. And honestly, you guys, it's made 2025 so boring. I mean, across the board. Like, not only is this boring and bad strategy, it's weenie behavior. Like, if I can be real with you, it's weenie behavior. Moving on. Here's a newsflash. The creative industry is failing neurodivergent talent. New data shows that nearly half of all employees in advertising, marketing, PR, and media identify as neurodivergent, and the creative industry is systematically failing to support them. This new study was released by understood.org in collaboration with the 4As and Havas, and it's called Unlocking Neurodiversity, a Creative Advantage, in case you want to look it up. Okay, so neurodivergence encompasses a range of cognitive differences from ADHD and autism to dyslexia and OCD and beyond. The study confirmed what we know to be true, and that is creatives that are neurodivergent bring really essential skills to the brainstorm table. They have incredible pattern recognition, lateral thinking, resourcefulness, and the uncanny ability to challenge assumptions. But as the numbers show, they often are marginalized by outdated work workplace norms. They report higher rates of burnout, dissatisfaction, and bias than their neurotypical peers. And so 90% of these neurodivergent employees say that they're masking at work or concealing behaviors or tendencies so that they appear more neurotypical to fit in. And many are doing this out of fear because half of neurodivergent employees don't disclose their status in the workplace, and at least 25% have faced discrimination or bias due to their differences. And this constant masking is a full-time job on top of a full-time job, and it contributes to exhaustion, imposter syndrome, and eventually attrition. But what do we mean when we say outdated workplace norms? Well, there's parts of our culture in this industry that remain completely inflexible. I'm sure as I said that, some things came to mind for you. First and foremost, top of mind for me would be the priority and obsession with speed. But there's also fixations on certain ways of collaboration and really rigid timelines. And we see 70% of these neurodivergent individuals report time management as a challenge, while 55% cite problems with organization. Think of things like back-to-back meetings, open office floor plans, or even brainstorms that require you to have instantaneous ideation. These are the things that we're talking about, common practices in our industry that are often inaccessible to people who process information differently. And to add some color to this, I have been a neurodivergent marketer for as long as I've been a marketer, which is 13 years. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you I was 30 years old before I understood that staying after hours, attending happy hours, while optional, were actually social bids for opportunity, connection, growth. You know, I have to mask in various ways, like sitting correctly in a seat, wearing uncomfortable clothing, tolerating fluorescent lighting, or being interrupted in the middle of thinking or working, being interrupted by the expectation to be available for every notification, email, and Slack alert, trying really earnestly hard to understand all of the different communication styles of the people around me, or trying to discern in any given moment whether or not they're being serious or making a joke that I should be laughing at, or just trying to restrain some of my idiosyncrasies or compulsions. One thing that has consistently gotten me into hot water in my career is my inability to not just simply react honestly to information. I think like a lot of neurodivergent people, I often get really held up by these questions of philosophy or ethos or, the why behind any given project that we do. It's really hard for me to do any kind of work that I don't understand the purpose behind. I think what I've learned and what my most trusted colleagues have learned in this process is that nothing really matters more than the creativity, than the work. I can share with you a few things that are non-negotiables for me that people have been super cool about. I don't do live brainstorming. Like, I know we have this Mad Men obsession. Like, it's very sexy, right? To get on the whiteboard. I have a really hard time synthesizing information very quickly, especially verbal communication. I need to spend time with the written brief. I need to really dig into all of the written materials. I also think we overvalue thinking on your feet. I'm a huge proponent of I don't know, but I'll get back to you. And I use that a lot. What's another one? I can't do back-to-back meetings. Some of you have noticed my yellow eyeglasses. I highly recommend if you do struggle with sensory issues. For me, they help to sort of soften and warm up everything so that it's not sort of sharp and bright and cold, which can cause me physical pain. These are just some of the ways that I've kind of accommodated myself after years of just suffering. But let's say you're neurotypical and you're in a management role, or you're just a really responsible peer and you want to know how to better support what is nearly half of the people that you work with, whether or not they self-identify to you. Well, I have a few ideas. Number one, if someone seems aloof at work, don't take that personally. I think it's sometimes ridiculous that we fail to admit to ourselves and each other that we're not just spending, 8 hours a day away from our friends and family and hobbies and safe houses for nothing. We're here for a reason, and it's not necessarily the work. Sometimes it is, but for many of us, it's a job. And it's health insurance. And in my experience, neurodivergent people will give you 120% within the boundaries of that workday. But you may not see them at the happy hour or the company retreat because they rely on that recovery time. Number 2, and this is tough, but I encourage you to reflect if you find yourself over concerned with the ways in which people dress or hold their bodies or sit in a chair, how much they do or do not give you eye contact, how quickly they talk or how slowly they talk. I gently encourage you to redirect your focus to the work, their creativity, their value to the group, and not so much their presentation. It's really and truly besides the point. Make space, because people that feel safe will begin to share the range and depth of their talents with you. Number 3, if you're a neurotypical and you're adaptable to many communication styles, invite neurodivergent people to share their communication style with you. There are some people that are not going to work well with random surprise desk visits. You know, if you're talking to somebody whose day is completely derailed by Slack messages scattered throughout the day, maybe you can set a check-in meeting at the beginning or end of the day or an email to catch up on all of your questions. I think it really is that simple. Number 4. Are we on number 4? Patience is a virtue. I think neurodivergent people in the marketing industry are often considered antagonistic. Again, we can sometimes throttle the conversation, be stuck on questions of why, what is the value of this work, what are some of the potential outcomes that we may not be able to anticipate. And sometimes it can feel like we're sucking the excitement out of the brief. But I think patience in these situations is essential because we really need the perspectives of neurodivergent people who, by the way, represent not just a significant part of our industry, but of the population at large, you know, the people we're communicating to. I think as a leader, you'll know that you're doing it right in accommodating neurodivergence in your organization when those individuals feel safe to raise their hand, to ask everybody to slow down for a minute, to pose really difficult questions. That's an essential function of your team and your mission. And number 5, if you are in a leadership role, it's really important to start building in this advocacy in the fine print, working with HR, whatever that looks like for your organization, to make sure that there are accommodations and processes available when people do come forward and seek them, that it's a safe process and that they're protected throughout. This report showed that only 18% of neurodivergent employees do request accommodations. Of those that do, 80% report being satisfied with the outcome, which is a really hopeful stat. It seems to suggest that even low-cost adjustments can have a really significant impact on workplace culture and the livelihood and wellness of what is nearly half of your workforce. We shared this report with the Daily Carnage community in our newsletter, and we heard back from some folks who were really delighted to have this conversation. I think it's important for those of us in this community to talk about some of the challenges we've faced in this atmosphere, some of the ways we've advocated for ourselves, the risks involved in that, the wins, the ways in which we've been accommodated, and the ways in which we've just had to self-accommodate. There's so much room to share resources about this, to make progress both at the organization level and at the culture level. It will only enhance the work and the experience of not just neurodivergent people, but neurotypical people as well. Because an inclusive, accepting environment that allows people to show up as their authentic selves and honestly represent their needs and have them met in a kind of community just brings the best out of every creative person, no matter where you fall on that spectrum. I'd love to keep talking about this topic, so if you have thoughts on this, please email us, and you can talk to over 20,000 people in our community in our exclusive Facebook group, or drop us a line on social. But that wraps it up for the Daily Carnage Show. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for daily content. And until next time, I'll see you in the inbox. Stay cool and have a good weekend, Carnies.